Imagine an island where emerald fields stretch from horizon to horizon. Yet despite this natural unity, Ireland today is split between two countries. The Republic of Ireland governs most of the island, while the northeast corner, Northern Ireland, remains part of the United Kingdom. How did one island come to be cut in two? The answer lies in centuries of history, filled with invasions, rebellions, and changing loyalties. The border running 310 miles across the island is a relatively recent creation. It was drawn a century ago, after Ireland's war for independence in 1921. To understand why it exists, we must journey back through time. In the scenes ahead, we will travel through Ireland's past, from ancient beginnings to modern peace, and discover how this line was written into the land, and how, today, once warring communities are learning to live together. Long before any written records, people lived and thrived on this island. Archaeologists have discovered megalithic stone tombs, like the Great Passage Grave of Newgrange, built by Ireland's first farmers thousands of years ago. These early inhabitants left behind few stories of their own. The island truly came of age in the Iron Age, when Celtic tribes arrived around 500 BC. They brought their language and culture, which evolved into Gaelic. Over the centuries, Ireland was divided into dozens of small kingdoms or clans. Each clan was ruled by a local chieftain. Occasionally, these chieftains would acknowledge a high king at Tara, but power was mostly local and contested. Rival clans often warred over cattle and land. Laws and customs were passed down orally by poets and judges, and religion was polytheistic, guided by a learned class of druids. Ireland's isolation from Rome meant it avoided direct conquest by the Roman Empire, but it was touched by Roman influence. By the late 4th and early 5th centuries AD, Christian ideas began to reach the island, coming from Roman Britain. Figures like St. Patrick, himself a former captive, became legendary for converting the Irish from Celtic paganism to Christianity. The new faith also brought literacy and learning. Monasteries sprang up across Ireland's green hills, founded by monks who became famous scribes and scholars. These monasteries housed libraries and scriptoria, where manuscripts were copied and illuminated. In an age when much of Europe was losing classical knowledge, Irish monks preserved it. By the 6th century, Ireland was known as a land of saints and scholars, famed for beautifully illustrated books like the Book of Kells and for sending missionaries abroad. The monasteries and abbeys of Ireland, full of gold and manuscripts, eventually drew danger from overseas. In 795 AD, Viking longships first appeared on Ireland's coasts. Norse raiders from Scandinavia attacked coastal monasteries and settlements, seizing treasure and taking slaves. For the next century, these raids intensified. By the 9th and 10th centuries, the Vikings began to settle, not just plunder. They founded Ireland's first towns. Dublin, Wexford, Waterford, Cork, and Limerick all grew up as Viking trading ports. These new cities linked Ireland into the Norse trade networks stretching across the North Atlantic. Yet the Vikings never conquered the whole island. Gaelic chiefs fought back and kept control of the interior. In 1014, the Irish High King Brian Boru defeated a Norse-Irish alliance at the Battle of Clontarf, breaking the Vikings' power. After that victory, Ireland entered a period of growth, with its coastal towns thriving in trade, even as it remained politically divided among Gaelic kingdoms. By the 12th century, another foreign power entered the story. In 1169, Dermot MacMurrough, an exiled king of Leinster, invited Norman knights from Wales to help him reclaim his throne. Richard de Clare, known as Strongbow, arrived with Norman warriors, capturing Dublin and Leinster. Alarmed, England's King Henry II crossed to Ireland in 1171 to assert control. He claimed all of Ireland under the English crown, declaring himself Lord of Ireland. Henry even declared his son John as Lord of Ireland, beginning formal English rule. Norman nobles then spread across the east and south, building castles and establishing lordships. But in the north and west, powerful Gaelic kings still held the land. England's grip on Ireland remained incomplete. Separated from England by the sea and surrounded by Irish lords, the Norman settlers in Ireland gradually adopted local ways. In the 13th and 14th centuries, many Anglo-Norman families intermarried with Gaelic chiefs and learned the Irish language. As one saying went, these settlers became more Irish than the Irish themselves. The English crown was worried, and in 1367 passed the Statutes of Kilkenny. These laws forbade marriage between Normans and Irish, and outlawed the Irish language and customs for the colonists. The statutes had little real effect. By the 15th century, English power in Ireland had shrunk to a tiny area around Dublin called the Pale. Outside that region, the old Gaelic dynasties and even the once Norman lords now ruled their territories almost as independent Irish chieftains. In the 16th century, the English crown renewed its effort to conquer Ireland. King Henry VIII took radical steps. He declared himself head of the church and made himself King of Ireland, 1541, replacing the old title of Lord. He introduced the policy of surrender and re-grant, offering Irish chiefs English titles and legal
legal ownership if they swore loyalty. Most chieftains refused and rose in rebellion instead. One example was the Fitzgerald family in Munster, who rebelled twice, 1550s and 1570s, and whose lands were seized after defeat. In response, England began planting loyal Protestant settlers in Munster. In Ulster in the north, a great revolt finally broke out. Hugh O'Neill, Earl of Tyrone, united many Irish clans in a war, 1594 to 1603, against English rule. O'Neill won several battles and even received aid from Catholic Spain. But in 1601, O'Neill's Irish-Spanish force was decisively defeated at the Battle of Kinsale in Cork. O'Neill surrendered 2 years later. In 1607, O'Neill and other leading Ulster chiefs fled Ireland for the continent, the flight of the Earls. Their departure marked the end of the old Gaelic order. From then on, Ireland was largely under English control. With the Gaelic nobility displaced, the English crown launched plantations, organized colonization. In 1609, King James I, 6th of Scotland, confiscated much of Ulster, once the land of O'Neill and other chiefs, and redistributed it to Protestant settlers from England and Scotland. Tens of thousands of new settlers arrived, making Ulster a patchwork of English and Scottish landholdings amid the remaining Irish. Towns were fortified and expanded. For example, the city of Derry was rebuilt by London merchants and renamed Londonderry in honor of its sponsors. Protestant tenants replaced many Catholic farmers. Smaller plantations occurred in other provinces as well. Lands in Munster and Connaught, taken from defeated Irish rebels, were given to English soldiers and adventurers. Over time, a new class of English-speaking Protestant landowners dominated Ireland's big estates. This deepened Irish resentment. Catholics saw their historic lands settled by foreigners while they became tenant farmers. By the 1640s, 1/3 of Ireland's land was in Protestant hands. The social fabric was becoming sharply divided by religion and ethnicity. The tensions of the plantations finally exploded in rebellion. In 1641, Irish Catholic gentry in Ulster launched a rising against the Protestant settlers. What began as an attempt to protect Catholic interests quickly turned violent and sectarian. Settlers were attacked and reprisals followed. The uprising spread across the island, causing widespread chaos. Meanwhile, England was engulfed in its own civil war. In 1649, the parliamentarians, the Roundheads, defeated the king, then sent their general Oliver Cromwell to subdue Ireland. Cromwell's campaign, 1649 to 1653, was relentless. His new model army besieged and stormed Irish towns, committing infamous massacres at Drogheda and Wexford. Town after town fell to English forces. By the war's end, the impact on Irish Catholics was catastrophic. Vast estates once held by Irish lords were confiscated and granted to Cromwell's soldiers and creditors. So complete was this expropriation that by the 1650s, Irish Catholics owned only a small fraction of their former land, around 10%. After Cromwell's era, the monarchy was restored in England, 1660, but Ireland remained troubled. In 1685, James II, a Catholic, became King of England, Scotland, and Ireland, and Irish Catholics cheered. But James was soon deposed in the Glorious Revolution, bringing Protestant William of Orange to power. William landed in Ireland in 1690, and at the Battle of the Boyne, 1690, defeated James's army. The war continued, and in 1691, William's forces won again at Aughrim. The defeated Jacobites signed the Treaty of Limerick, which was supposed to guarantee Catholic rights. Instead, Protestant hardliners soon overturned those terms. In the years that followed, a strict system of penal laws was enacted against Catholics. These laws barred Irish Catholics from voting, holding public office, serving in parliament, owning firearms, or inheriting land from Protestants. Even practicing the Catholic faith became risky. By 1700, an Anglican Protestant minority, the Protestant ascendancy, controlled most political power and property. Over 3/4 of Ireland's population, Catholics, were reduced to landless tenants and laborers. Gaelic culture and Catholicism survived, but only on the margins in the countryside. The 18th century under the ascendancy was more stable than the wars before it, but deep divisions remained. The Irish Parliament at Dublin, now Protestant only, had limited powers and was often subservient to London. Catholics could not vote or sit in that parliament. However, a few reformers emerged. In 1782, under pressure from American and French revolutionary ideas, the Irish Parliament achieved a measure of legislative independence, the Grattan Parliament. This was a milestone, but it still left Catholics without real representation. Meanwhile, the radical spirit of the age ignited a more inclusive movement. In 1791, liberal Protestants in Belfast and nationalist Catholics in Dublin formed the Society of United Irishmen, led by Wolfe Tone and others. They sought to unite all Irish people, Catholic, Presbyterian, and Anglican, in one Irish republic. They demanded democratic reform, Catholic emancipation, and independence from Britain. In 1798, the United Irishmen launched a nationwide rebellion. Uprisings broke out in Ulster and in County Wexford. Despite initial successes, the rebels were brutally crushed. Tens of thousands died in battles and massacres, for example, at Vinegar Hill. Wolfe Tone was captured and later died in a British prison, becoming a martyr. The failure of 1798 convinced the British government government that Ireland must be ruled more directly to prevent further revolution. To tighten its control, the British government carried out a drastic change. On January 1st, 1801, the Acts of Union took effect. The Kingdom of Ireland was officially merged with the Kingdom of Great Britain, creating the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. The Irish Parliament in Dublin was abolished. Instead, Irish representatives, both Protestant and Catholic, now took seats in the Parliament at Westminster. Many Irish people viewed this as the loss of their last measure of autonomy. Nevertheless, the move was intended to stabilize Ireland under direct British rule. The 19th century would show that despite the Union, Ireland's aspirations for self-government remained very much alive. Under the Union, the condition of ordinary Irish changed little until new leaders emerged. One hero was Daniel O'Connell, a Catholic lawyer. In the 1820s, he led massive peaceful rallies demanding Catholic rights. His tireless agitation forced Britain's hand. In 1829, the Catholic Relief Act was passed. With Catholic emancipation, Irish Catholics, like O'Connell himself, could now vote and hold public office. It was a huge victory for civil rights in Ireland. Just as hope seemed to be growing, tragedy struck. From 1845 to 1849, Ireland was gripped by the Great Famine. A potato blight destroyed the staple crop for millions of rural poor. The British government's response was slow and often ineffective. Relief was limited and uneven, while food exports out of Ireland continued. As a result, about 1 million people starved or died of disease. Another million fled the country, emigrating to America, Canada, Australia, and Britain. By 1850, Ireland's population had fallen by roughly a quarter. The famine shattered the old society and deepened Irish anger at British rule. It left a legacy of trauma and a global Irish diaspora that would influence Ireland's future. In the decades after the famine, Irish nationalism grew more organized. A new political movement called Home Rule demanded that Ireland have its own parliament to handle domestic affairs while remaining in the UK. Leaders like Charles Stewart Parnell campaigned for Home Rule in the 1880s and 1890s, building a mass base among Catholics and some Protestants. Yet each Home Rule bill was blocked in the British Parliament. Irish frustration continued, but the island remained in the United Kingdom. Meanwhile, Irishmen continued to serve in the British Empire. When World War I erupted in 1914, over 200,000 Irishmen, both Catholic and Protestant, enlisted to fight in Britain's army. They hoped that loyalty in war would earn Ireland concessions afterward. At the same time, impatience at home was growing. In April 1916, exploiting Britain's wartime distraction, a small group of Irish Republicans staged the Easter Rising in Dublin. About 1,600 rebels seized key buildings and proclaimed an Irish Republic. British forces crushed the revolt within a week. The leaders, like Patrick Pearse and James Connolly, were executed. Initially, most Irish were shocked by the uprising, but the executions turned the rebels into martyrs. Popular sympathy swung toward independence. By war's end in 1918, nationalist sentiment had reached a fever pitch. In the December 1918 election, Sinn Féin, the Party of Independence, won a landslide across most of Ireland. The Sinn Féin MPs refused to go to Westminster. Instead, in January 1919, they convened in Dublin as Dáil Éireann, proclaiming an independent Irish Republic. That same day, the Irish volunteers organized themselves as the Irish Republican Army, IRA, and began a guerrilla war against the British. From 1919 to 1921, Ireland was engulfed in the War of Independence. IRA fighters ambushed British soldiers and the Irish police, the Royal Irish Constabulary, across the countryside. The British government responded with harsh reprisals and special forces. By mid-1921, both sides were exhausted and bloodied. A truce was called in July 1921, and talks opened in London. The negotiations produced the Anglo-Irish Treaty of December 1921. It ended the war, but it divided Ireland. Under the treaty, 26 of Ireland's 32 counties, almost all of the south and west, would leave the United Kingdom and become a self-governing Irish Free State within the British Commonwealth. The remaining 6 counties in the north, Northern Ireland, where Protestants were a majority, would opt out and stay in the UK. Crucially, the treaty required an oath of allegiance to the British Crown. This compromise infuriated many Irish Republicans. The treaty split Irish nationalists in two. From 1922 to 1923, Ireland's civil war pitted brother against brother. Pro-treaty forces, the National Army of the Free State, led by Michael Collins and others, fought anti-treaty Republicans, led by Eamon de Valera. The fighting was brutal. Michael Collins, one of the independence heroes, was killed in an ambush. By 1923, the pro-treaty side prevailed, and the Free State secured its rule over most of Ireland, except the 6 counties of Northern Ireland. In the new Irish Free State, leaders like W.T. Cosgrave and later Eamon de Valera built a nation after centuries of foreign rule. In 1937, de Valera's government adopted a new constitution. It renamed the country simply Ireland, Éire in Irish, and removed all mention of the British monarch. Although Ireland still remained a a member of the British Commonwealth. Finally, in 1949, the Irish Parliament declared Ireland a republic and formally left the Commonwealth. The Republic of Ireland was born, fully independent of Britain. Meanwhile, across the border in Northern Ireland, Unionist politicians, most Protestants, held power unchallenged. They formed the Stormont government in Belfast and passed laws that discriminated against the Catholic minority. Voting districts were often gerrymandered, and public housing and jobs tended to favor Protestants. Catholics were underrepresented in the police and local councils. Northern Ireland had effectively become a Protestant majority state, where Catholics were largely excluded from power. By the late 1960s, Irish Catholics in Northern Ireland, inspired by global civil rights movements, began to demand equality. They organized peaceful marches for fair housing, voting rights, and jobs. Many Protestants feared these demands. In 1969, sectarian riots erupted between Catholic nationalists and Protestant loyalists. The Stormont government was overwhelmed, so the British Army was sent to restore order. Initially, some Catholics welcomed the soldiers, but soon many saw the army as siding with the Protestant authorities. Rioting and violence spread. This situation ignited the Troubles, a violent conflict lasting decades. On one side were Irish Republican paramilitaries, most famously the Provisional IRA, fighting to reunite Ireland. On the other were loyalist paramilitaries such as the UVF and UDA, and the British security forces fighting to keep Northern Ireland in the UK. Bombings, shootings, and street battles became tragically routine. Cities and towns across Northern Ireland saw frequent attacks. Even London and other British cities were targeted by the IRA's bomb campaign. In all, about 3,500 people were killed. Almost no community escaped the violence. After years of bloodshed, all sides grew weary and sought a way out. In 1994, a breakthrough finally came. The Provisional IRA announced a ceasefire, and loyalist paramilitaries soon followed. Multi-party negotiations began under British and Irish government auspices. After intense talks involving Northern Ireland's Unionist and Nationalist parties, a historic agreement was reached. On April 10, 1998, leaders signed the Good Friday Agreement, also called the Belfast Agreement. The Good Friday Agreement was complex but groundbreaking. It affirmed that Northern Ireland would remain in the UK unless a majority in the North chose otherwise. Crucially, it also acknowledged the Irish identity of the nationalist community. Anyone born in Northern Ireland could hold Irish citizenship, British citizenship, or both. The agreement created new institutions to foster cooperation across the island, such as a North-South Council for joint Irish-British matters. It set up a power-sharing government in Belfast, Stormont, where Unionist and Nationalist parties would govern together. These measures helped to end most of the violence and ushered in a tenuous peace. As the 21st century began, the scars of the Troubles remained, but a new era had arrived. Northern Ireland began to see peace dividends. Foreign investment flowed in, creating jobs, tourism revived in cities that had been war zones, and infrastructure projects improved daily life. Belfast and Derry, Londonderry, once synonymous with bombs and barricades, rebuilt their economies and opened cultural centers. In 2007, a new Stormont government finally took office under power-sharing rules, showing that former foes could work together. Meanwhile, the Republic of Ireland entered an economic boom. From the mid-1990s onward, Ireland's GDP grew at a spectacular rate, a phenomenon dubbed the Celtic Tiger. High-tech industries and foreign investment transformed the economy. Ireland went from being one of Western Europe's poorer countries to one of its wealthiest per person. Prosperity flowed into cities like Dublin, Cork, and Galway, funding modern infrastructure and a vibrant cultural scene. Today, Ireland is very different from the famine and war-torn land of a century ago. The island remains divided into two states, but rivalry has given way to cooperation. Trade and travel across the border are easier than ever. People on both sides increasingly see each other as neighbors and partners. Indeed, many now openly discuss the idea of a united Ireland, something that once seemed impossible. It is no longer unimaginable that one day the entire island might choose to stand together as one nation, ending its long history of division.